Hello, my name is Fletcher Kem, and for my financial analysis project, I chose to look at the Coca-Cola company. So, a quick little brief history of the Coca-Cola company. It was founded in 1886 in Atlanta, Georgia. It was created by Dr. John Pemberton, um, and it was really originally sold in pharmacies and was quickly later sold as fountain drinks. But by 1894, Coca-Cola began to bottle their products, and this was really big for them because the bottling industry became one of the biggest parts of their brand, and it's one of the biggest reasons why their brand expanded so quickly, as they were able to sell their products outside of just restaurants and pharmacies and really just in any retail store. And by the late 1890s, they became the largest soda slash fountain drink in America. And they would later become one of the biggest brands in the world, as by 2023, they're recognized as one of the 10 biggest brands in the entire world. And then in the 1960, Coca-Cola began expanding by making their first acquisition, which was Minute Maid, which at the time, Minute Maid was one of the other biggest beverage companies in the world. And this really started Coca-Cola's new initiative of really acquiring and diversifying the drink industry and moving away from just being a soda manufacturer, but being a manufacturer of really all types of beverages in general. So a lot of their key acquisitions here, I have them listed. And again, I think this is just super important because a lot of people think of the Coca-Cola company and obviously they think of Coke, but they're more than that. They're a very diverse company when it comes to the beverages market. As you can see, a lot of their recent acquisitions, like Fairlife in 2020, is a milk and dairy company. Honest Tea is tea. Minute Maid, they have Smart Water, Vitamin Water. They're really a very diverse beverage company. And I think it's something else worth mentioning was they have a lot of key acquisitions in foreign company or foreign countries, um, which I think is interesting. Like a lot of these, like Thumbs Up, which they purchased in 1993, is one of the biggest beverage companies in India. So I think it just shows that the Coca-Cola company really has their hand in not just the American market, but markets all across the world. And like I said in the history, it's one of the 10 biggest global brands in the world. And this is a very large part why. So a lot of their key products, I really like this image here, really breaks it down. They have obviously a very large market share in the soft drinks industry with Coca-Cola, Sprite, Diet Coke, Fanta. But they have a lot of water products as well, alcohol, coffee and tea, juices, dairy. It's just a very, very diverse beverage company. And they're more than just the soft drinks, which they started out with. So some of their biggest strengths is their very strong brand identity. Everybody knows Coca-Cola, the global reach, like I mentioned earlier, very large distribution network. They have 225 bottling partners and 900 bottling plants globally. And I think that's very important to mention because one of probably the most underrated aspects of the company is their bottling plants, which they lease out to a lot of other beverage companies. Um, they're they're a very big bottling brand, in terms of packaging products using plastic, which I'll talk about in a second with the weaknesses. But it's a very, very large part of their brand outside of just making beverages. And then obviously the large variety of beverages. They have more drinks than just Coke and soda. So I think in modern times when Coke and soda has been linked to a lot of health problems and is not seen as favorably as it probably used to be. It's very important that they diversified and they have a lot of brands outside of just sodas. So a lot of their weaknesses, high levels of competition. Obviously, Pepsi and Keurig Dr. Pepper are probably the two most notable. Um, a lot of their products are very elastic goods, meaning they have a lot of substitutes. So the high levels of competition can really take away from their sales. Low overall product diversification, even though they're very diverse in the drink market, That's pretty much all that they do outside of their bottling plants. They don't really have their hand in a lot of other brands like say PepsiCo does, where PepsiCo owns a lot of food and packaged good brands. Coca-Cola doesn't really do that. Health concerns, they've been linked to the obesity epidemic here in the US. Um, Heart disease, diabetes, have all been linked to sugary drinks like soda, and obviously Coca-Cola is the most notable soda there is. And then probably the biggest one, environmental concerns. They are the top plastic waste contributor in the world. And I think in modern times when um, climate change and recycling has become, major issues, and there's been a lot more regulation and public outcry, um, it's really going to have a pretty big impact on the Coca-Cola company because, like I said, the bottling aspect of the company is such a huge part of it. And that's obviously all plastic. So, if some regulations or if people stop buying their products to try and reduce their carbon footprint, um, it's really going to hurt their brand. So, some current news, they're expected to release earnings later this month. They have a new marketing campaign for the Olympics, named a new president for their global category. And then they recently launched the World Without Waste initiative, which is their response to combat their environmental issues and their plastic use. And they've set out a goal of using 50% recycled content by 2030. Okay, so here are the calculations for return on investment, and all these numbers were pulled from the 10K, and they're all in millions. So the return on investment came out to about 11.87%, which just tells you that it's a pretty profitable investment there. Um, the profit margin ratio came out to about 24.72%, which tells you that they keep about 25% of their sales revenue after costs, which about the industry average, I believe, is about 10 to 15%. So this 25% for the profit margin ratio is very high. It's definitely something worth noting as one of their biggest strengths and assets that they have. And then the asset turnover ratio came out to about 0.48, which is a little bit concerning. You would like to see they have a very large number of assets and they aren't necessarily generating the revenue to counteract that. Um, so one of the things you'd like to see is their assets generating a little bit more revenue. But I think their high profit margin ratio and their return on investment are solid enough I don't to say I don't think it's that major of an issue. And then the residual income, I used the 11.87% from the previous calculated ROI. And again, this is very similar to the asset turnover ratio, as this came out to a negative number, meaning that they really just need to generate a little bit more income to cover their high costs. And you'd like to see their assets being a little bit more profitable and generating more revenue. So I picked out a couple key numbers from the 10K that I thought were interesting. The total assets have seen about a 5.3% growth from 2022. Net operating revenue has seen about a 6.39% growth, and operating income has seen about a 3.69% growth. And I think this is interesting, especially the net operating revenue, as a lot of people, for a lot of people, they don't have as much disposable income to spend, purchasing power and inflation. So the fact that their operating revenue is still increasing, and it kind of tells you how important a lot of their products are to people, that even in these tougher times financially for a lot of people, um, Coke's numbers are still increasing. They're still seeing growth in their sales. So it really tells you that people are really willing to spend money on the Coca-Cola company, which is a good sign for them going forward. And then vertical analysis is the same thing, or the same statistics here with the total assets, net operating revenue, and operating income. They've all just increased. Okay, so I pulled the Coke and Pepsi consolidated income statements from their 10Ks respectively. This is Coke's and this is Pepsi's. And again, these numbers are all in millions here. And I just pulled these to show a kind of base for what I'm about to do here, which is the common size statements. And I think it's important to compare it to Pepsi because that's their big rival, the closest to them in terms of market share. Um, so the Coca-Cola company has seen a higher increase here, as you can tell, in net revenue compared to the PepsiCo company, but they've also seen a higher increase in cost of goods sold. So the gross profit between the two is relatively the same. As you can see, 116.89% for Coke and 116.96% for Pepsi. Um, but the big difference here is Coca-Cola selling and administrative expenses uh, are less than Pepsi's, which has led to a higher overall operating income, or at least increase in operating income compared to the PepsiCo company, respectively. Um, so both companies are doing pretty well here, and it's not a crazy difference between the two, but the Coca-Cola company is definitely the more profitable company out of the two and is probably the better investment out of the two here, just based on the numbers from the consolidated income statement. The liquidity, solvency, and profitability ratios. Coca-Cola's quick ratio came out to about 0.946. Um, so it's very close to one, but you'd like to see a little bit more current assets, as they can't necessarily meet their short-term debt obligations as of right now. I don't think it's anything to be concerned about because, again, it's very close to one. The debt ratio is 0.719, so they have more assets than debt, which tells you that the company is financially stable, which you'd expect for a company as large and successful as the Coca-Cola company. And then the profit margin ratio, which we calculated earlier, but it came out to 0.247 or about 24.7%. So just a very high percentage of sales revenue. Um, and it's probably one of the strongest things, I think, just looking at the numbers about the Coca-Cola company. It's just an incredibly profitable company. Um, and, they've been around for so long that, uh, you'd expect them to be profitable, but this is just significantly higher than the industry average. So I think it's just worth mentioning again. These are some financial statistics that I pulled from Yahoo Finance that I thought were worth mentioning and were pretty interesting. The beta value for Coca-Cola is 0.59. So usually when a beta value is below one, that tells you that the stock isn't super volatile and that it's not the price isn't going to fluctuate a ton. So this is definitely a conservative stock that you'd probably want to have for a long time. Probably isn't going to make a ton of money overnight, but it's a very safe investment that's going to prove to be profitable in the long run. The dividend payout ratio came out to 74.9%, which signifies that it's not a very fast growing market, which is similar to the beta value. And that's kind of why the beta value is so low, is that the market's not growing a ton. It's not going to see a ton of increases. It's not a very volatile market, but it's a profitable one for sure. And it's definitely a long-term investment. And then the forward price to earnings um, of 22.57 tells you that the stock is not undervalued, and that the high growth is not expected. So very similar to these two numbers here. So overall, the final takeaways here, um, I think their biggest strengths are their global identity, their profit margin ratio and ROI, and the fact that they're a very financially stable company that's going to be profitable in the long run, as well as just having better numbers and being the bigger brand than their rivals. The things to worry about here, though, are the environmental impact. That could be a huge problem, especially with new regulations and their asset turnover ratio and their high costs. But overall, I think if you're looking for a conservative stock that's probably going to be profitable in the long run, I do think the Coca-Cola company is a very solid and smart and safe investment. So yeah, and then here are my works cited that I use. All right, thank you.